Mr. President, Commissioners, good morning. It's 11:30.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ada County Highway District. Before we do anything else today, we have an honored guest who is Chief Ryan Lee, Boise's Chief of Police, who we have asked to meet with today because most of us have never met the man, and he's never met any of us, and now that's over with, so we can have an enjoyable time finding out more about him and asking some questions. So take it away, Chief, as soon as Ken's got you ready.
Commissioners, thank you very much for affording me this opportunity to speak with you, even if we're having to do it at a reasonable, safe distance as the time requires. I'd really like to just take a moment to talk to you a little bit about the traffic safety efforts we're making at Boise Police Department and how hopefully we can find ways to dovetail those together and collaborate to address some of the challenges we're seeing with the rapidly growing and expanding community that we both serve. So with that, I think it's probably fair to quickly give a little bit of an introduction and some context to my background as to why I might be a little more passionate about traffic safety than previous chiefs of police. In the other city I used to work in, one of my assignments was, prior to going into the chief's office, was supervising the traffic division and the major crash team of that city. And in that time, I responded to over 120 fatal crashes. I've seen the causes and the cost to human life. And I take traffic safety very, very seriously as a result of that. It was arguably one of the most informative and frankly, transformative appreciations of traffic safety from both the education, engineering, and enforcement perspectives, and most importantly, the forgotten fourth E, which is really to be able to sit back and evaluate the programs and processes that we have in place to see if they are effectively serving the community, which is probably a good way to talk a little bit about why we're doing some of the restructuring that we are in the Boise Police Department. And so for my agenda today, I'll talk a little bit about the direction of BPD, some of the efforts that we are making there, some of the continued partnerships and conversations I think ACHD and the Boise Police Department can have. Some areas that officers have expressed to me might be areas that we can innovate together or find ways to collaborate on together, and then just responding and preparing for the growth that I've already mentioned. And so with that, did the slide not advance? Oh, the challenges of our time. There we go. I'll find the right button eventually. So one of the first things I noticed when I came to the Boise Police Department was while we had a plan for traffic enforcement, it was really fragmented into different units. There was an expectation of patrol operations to be doing traffic enforcement related efforts in their discretionary time as available and appropriate as presented to itself. We had a dedicated motorcycle unit doing traffic enforcement largely during the daytime hours. And then we have what we refer to as night step, really a traffic enforcement team focused heavily on DUIs during those evening hours. Obviously, if we've got a slightly disjointed approach in the department, it doesn't allow us to have sort of the strategic vision that we did. So we have realigned the traffic unit in the Boise Police Department to create a single consolidated traffic unit. We have motors officers working hand in hand with our DUI officers working at night in cars. We're looking at diversified deployment models where we're using motors at night, having DUI cars during the day, during prime days that we're noticing from data. We're contacting DUIs. We're also tasking that unit and its leadership with crafting the overall traffic mission and traffic direction based off of data, looking at high crash corridors and looking for opportunities to work not just in the enforcement realm, but really in the education realm as well, and to partner with you and ITD in engineering related issues that may or may not present themselves from the ground level that we're seeing. So it's a pretty significant restructure and redesign in the thought process of how we're approaching traffic as one of the primary concerns of the community. Along with that, we're emphasizing the need to continue to invest in dedicated traffic resources under this fiscal year, which started in 1 October. There was the addition of one full-time employee to be assigned to motorcycle unit work to enhance the capabilities of the department. And we'll begin to plot out the need to expand that department as we continue to look at the growth and the challenges for the community as we move forwards. We're also engaging in an effort to capture much more robust data for a variety of sets, but obviously traffic data is of significance for the conversation we're having here today and with all of you, the commissioners. And so I would start really, and we can answer this either at the end of the presentation or even now, but I want to make sure that we're getting you the data that ACHD needs. And if there's a place where maybe we're not capturing the data, help us recognize blind spots so that we can capture more effective data to continue our collaboration and partnerships. With that said, we are noticing some general trends. We pulled the data from January to September, so fairly close to year-to-date data. You can see that we've got over 4,600 total crashes that the Boise Police Department's responded to, 1,762 non-injury crashes, 611 were coded as injury crashes, and 610 of those were crashes that resulted in lane blockage. And so when we look at this from a systems-wide approach, we need to recognize that those lane blockages, the amount of time it takes to clear, the impact that that has on other roadway users, and then the cascading effect that that has on the entire, Treasure Valley's fiscal health as we're delaying motorists, whether they're motorists traveling for their own purposes or motorists traveling for the purposes of their work. It does have some cascading financial impacts to the community. And so we're open to ideas of any way we can partnership to minimize those crashes that result in lane blockage, as well as anything that we might be able to do to expedite the ability to continue to either have pre-planned diversionary points, other things to continue to let the roadways flow effectively. There's also a need for the Boise Police Department to develop or better develop our ability to do crash reconstruction so that we can accurately capture causal factors of the crashes, as well as examine any lessons that we might be able to learn that created those factors. What we are noticing is that there is a general trend towards some of those involved in crashes. There's a younger demographic. And that there is a component of distracted driving, at least in this year, that has resulted in some of our more significant crashes. And I think that there's some strong opportunities for us to partner with ACHD as well as ITD and really work on a concerted education campaign to help inform drivers about their responsibilities, not just drivers, but frankly, all road users about their responsibilities and their ability to minimize some of those risks, as well as the risk and peril of distracted driving. As I mentioned, inattentive driving. Okay, hang on a second. There we go. As I mentioned, inattentive driving is the leading cause of crashes in the data set that we pulled right now. There's a high number of crashes involving drivers under the age of 25. We've noticed a general trend where crashes increase in the winter. Obviously, lower light visibility as well as more challenging natural roadway conditions are probably significant factors in that. We are noticing a trend where there are fewer injuries, and in large part that's due to both road design, but particularly vehicle design. The vehicles we have on the roadways today, you can be involved in a crash that frankly you're much more likely to survive than even say a decade ago you would have been capable of surviving. The image inset to the right on the screen, there was no significant injury to any of those occupants despite the amount of damage that you see done to that vehicle as indicative of sort of this engineering change. I think there's obviously the automotive industry's ability to do engineering changes. I think there are probably opportunities for us to continue to look at other engineering opportunities in roadway design to further enhance its survivability when these crashes do occur. But with that said, we do notice also that there are some challenges for what we'll dub as vulnerable road users. And so the city of Boise is aware of the significant and disproportionate percentage of traffic-related fatalities in Boise involve either pedestrians or cyclists, and finding ways to have that interface between motorized vehicular traffic, cyclists, and pedestrians to minimize that potential for significant, or in this particular case, fatal crashes would be important. Looking at ITD's up-to-date data for 2020, 19% of the fatal crashes here in the city of Boise involve pedestrian, 4% involve cyclists. So there are some challenges for us, the police department, from enforcement and education standpoint, as well as maybe some potential opportunities to examine engineering to minimize some of those risks to those road users as well. We really think that there is a strong opportunity for us to continue to partner. I think in some ways there's an opportunity for, and I would invite any of the commissioners that wish to attend any of our briefings to please come in and make those connections, because often, as with any organization, the information sometimes is best fed to those people making decisions from those out there doing sort of the line level work. They're aware of things that may seem obvious to us that maybe aren't. And so I would invite any of you to attend any of our briefings and make those connections with the folks out there doing traffic related enforcement, to just sort of hear from the ground eye level. It's that direct information will help all of us as decision makers figure out the best course moving forwards. I think there's an opportunity for us to collaborate on some of the larger significant planned events to minimize both the impact to roadway users as well as the potential for any more harmful interactions that could occur between roadway users, regardless of the type that they are. I know that in the past, we've had great success in identifying places that are challenges and helping to talk to ACHD in figuring out ways to help re-engineer intersections. Pardon me. Cole and Oberlin is a prime example of an effort where BPD was able to partner with ACHD and examine the engineering design of it and find a way to minimize or decrease the number of crashes there and make it safer for the road users. And then I think there's really an opportunity for us to sit down and look at joint responses to traffic complaints, because obviously there are the complaints that come into the police department. There are probably complaints that come into ACHD. Some of those may overlap, and it gives us a better sense of what intersections are really concerning the community and what different approaches we may be able to partner in, or one, frankly, may land more squarely in the other one's lap and we can convey that information. But there's probably also locations where you're receiving complaints where maybe the department doesn't realize the magnitude and vice versa. And so I think there's a good opportunity for us to really be sharing that information back and forth between both of us to the greatest degree possible. And so really, as I'm starting to wrap this up, I'd like to talk about some of the future opportunities I see for us. I think that there is a strong ability for ACHD to join us in some of the partner messaging out there, particularly as I mentioned earlier about issues such as distracted driving, winter driving conditions, speed as causal factors relating to injury. There's an opportunity for us to sit down and discuss engineering best practices to help inform both the officers so that we're conveying information to see whether or not engineering design is playing out as we hope and is intended to, or there are other issues that maybe our good road users are not paying attention to the way the road is intended to be used, and we can help communicate some of that information. There's really a strong opportunity for us to evaluate any of the changes or even the current conditions to see whether or not there are engineering related issues that may yield better road usage with lower trauma, or frankly, whether or not there's a need for us to have more specific and targeted enforcement in particular areas to complement the engineering designs that are there. And really, frankly, I'm also pushing very heavily inside my department for innovative ideas, regardless of where they're coming from. So some of the things that officers wanted me to convey as items that we might want to look at, and I just flagged for the commissioner's attention, is nosing the pedestrian timing of signals relative to traffic lights, advantages in certain particular high traffic areas for reflective striping as a potential option, and really examining the potential benefits of divided highways and users divided on roadways as ways to minimize negative interactions between all of our road users. And with that very sort of high-level conversation about some of the areas that I see as potentially beneficial in some of the efforts with the Boise Police Department, I would open the floor to any of my esteemed colleagues for questions that you might have of me.
Well, we really appreciate you being here. I do have a question myself, and that has to do with, you mentioned the timing of pedestrian lights, and I think you're probably already aware of this, that we're making some pretty strong efforts to make sure our flashing yellow lights don't interfere with that safe crossing. And I know we're still working hard on that. I only have one other request, and that's to borrow an Opticon for one weekend. Okay.
Very well. I think when we talk about the timing of intersection lights, there are probably places that the officers are recognizing we may have data on sort of those near misses that maybe aren't conveyed to you, where thankfully for good circumstances, we've avoided something significant. I think one of the challenges that we have, we may get the call from the concerned citizen that says, hey, I almost got hit by a car. That isn't necessarily captured in the data sets that you would get. And so that's an example of some of the information I hope that we can find ways to capture and get to you so that we're recognizing some of the challenging, pardon me, some of the challenges that we're seeing with growth. We're seeing neighborhoods that are exploding in their density. We're seeing more pedestrian road users, than we have seen than maybe when that was originally designed and engineered for. And so some of those opportunities to convey that as to places to really examine where we might want to prioritize some of our efforts.
There's something else that you mentioned about kind of some joint work with our engineers, and you had speed bumps down there. I would personally think that it would do us all a world of good to get some opinions from your folks as to where those actually might be better utilized for all the purposes that they're set forth to be, rather than possibly having to go through all kinds of traffic studies and have citizens pay for part of it and everything else. If your folks think it's important that there be a speed bump somewhere, I think we'd like to hear that.
I will graciously ask my team for their input and that information. I'll make sure that the commissioners know the areas of their greatest concern.
And now Jim won't have to ask.
Mr. President, I just want to thank you, Chief Lee, for coming in today. This is, it's great to have you here, and a belated welcome to Idaho. One of the issues that we hear on a regular basis is the traffic mitigation, specifically speeding through the residential areas in particular and the work zones. And we're only part of that equation when we come in and we post the speed limits, but the enforcement falls to you and your team to do that. So your focus on collaborating, I would really want to encourage that, because I think then we can work together and meet some of these challenges that we're seeing. And if we come at it with a united front, I think there's an opportunity to learn and institute some best practices there. So thank you very much for your invitation to come to the briefings and work more closely with our staff, and I look forward to that. So thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Chief Lee, thank you so much for the presentation. I've got several questions for you. I'm just really curious, I know that our staff, I'm really pleased to see that our staff work together on crash data and talking about, something that happens and what really happened and how can we all work together. But since I've been on the commission, a lot of those discussions or really bigger findings haven't been shared with us. So I know it's been kind of sprinkled around, but having some more, of course we can't be involved in all the things or know all the data trends, but having some sort of threshold in place where it's like, hey, this is a really big cause for concern, or we've seen some trends with this type of intersection. Having that kind of information would be really helpful, and I'm telling that to staff too, just so we can all work together to make sure that we're not repeating those types of design errors.
No, I appreciate that, Commissioner. I think one of the advantages is with the restructuring of our traffic efforts and having, frankly, a single lieutenant that's overseeing both our dedicated resources as well as the overall plan, who frankly used to be a motor officer himself and is very committed to traffic safety. I think that should help some of those higher threshold events or learned lessons, because we don't have this sort of disparate sources that are feeding information to the commission. Will have a single point. And so I'll make sure that my staff, Lieutenant Nia in particular, is in connection with your staff.
That'd be great. And then one element of that is, I don't envy your job at all or any of the folks that go in and try and replicate what might have happened at a crash, but we've seen, at least I've seen as just a normal citizen, and sometimes of these reports and in the police reports, it's like, oh, we couldn't identify if this person was in the crosswalk when they were hit and killed, because they were launched, 20 feet away because of how the car struck them when they were in the crosswalk potentially. And so could you explain just some of the potential ongoing that you're giving your staff to kind of better understand what might have happened, so accurate reporting could be as a result of that?
So generally speaking, in the past, the way we responded to a fatal crash was our violent crimes detectives would respond. Those are the same same detectives that would respond to, and I don't want to call it a traditional homicide, but more what people think of as a homicide. What we really need to do, and what Lieutenant Nia has been tasked with, is building a major crash team model where we have crash specialists that look at vehicular homicides and causal factors, that are fully certified as reconstructionists, that also have the technology and capabilities to process those scenes more rapidly, yet more thoroughly as well. That should significantly help. In my experience in my previous life, that significantly helped our ability to determine causal factors in both traumatic crashes as well as fatal crashes.
Okay, thank you. And then, just one other question. You talked about innovative designs, and of course, Commissioner Goldthorpe piped up about the flashing yellows, but we haven't really instituted a lot of leading pedestrian intervals across our county. Is that another idea, or do you have other ideas of how we can really improve pedestrian visibility and reduce those deaths?
I am not going to say that I'm an engineer. I've sat down and seen some engineering designs that increase pedestrian visibility. I've also seen the benefits of separated roadway usage with physical barriers to minimize that. I think that particularly is relevant to cyclist communities, especially. And so there may be some opportunities in engineering design similar to that, especially as we see the growth and people choosing to travel on our roadways with different conveyances. Some of those design options, even if we implement them in high areas where, say, for example, we're seeing high pedestrian usage or high cyclist usage, maybe even to test those to see if there's statistically meaningful benefit to those designs. I think there's some areas for us to collaborate and innovate there as well.
Love that idea. And I was really curious. I know the city has had some really great internal conversations around Vision Zero, and we're going to have to, come together as a group to kind of hear what their vision is and how can we support them in that. But I'm really curious if there's been any discussion that's involved you and your team around what is your element of Vision Zero or anything like that on that topic.
There have been some peripheral conversations. I'm actually trying to coordinate a time to talk to the folks on the Vision Zero task force specifically about some of my past experiences as the relatively new chief here and some of the directions we're headed.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, Mr. President,
Yes.
and Chief, I appreciate you coming here. The data you collect is tremendously valuable, and the more you can share, the more it will help us make decisions. More than just crash data, because there's a lot of old neighborhoods, in Boise, where the roads were built in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and you're too young to remember this, but cars had stick shifts. That's how so you could actually physically hear yourself accelerating. Nowadays, you can just quietly accelerate well past the speed limit without even being conscious of it. We also had AM/FM radio, and you had to actually kind of tune it in as you move from one neighborhood to another. Now, we not only have a wide range of audio stimulus, but we have video stimulus and interactive stimulus. It's not just about being hands-free, it's being mind-free. So all of those contribute to a driver not paying attention to where they're driving. And so what we've learned from data collected of folks in traffic safety understand that physical environment of a street will draw the driver's attention. You need physical vertical elements, trees, a narrow road, parked cars, buildings close to the road. All of those, the driver knows that if they accelerate, they're going to hit one of those things. They're going to crash into another car or a tree. So that draws their attention back into the street. Unfortunately, we have streets through neighborhoods that don't have those. They may have parking spots, but there's no one using them. They may have trees, but they're way over to the side, and the buildings, the houses are set way back. So what that's doing is telling people, go for it. We don't really have a satisfactory way of evaluating, setting priorities as to which areas of our city these neighborhood, what we call collectors or minor arterials, where we have more speeding. If you talk to the neighborhood, and I know you and I were at the Vista Neighborhood Association, they have concerns about a couple of the streets in their neighborhood. That data on speeding would be tremendously helpful for us, and then also for you as kind of the main entity within the city that collects and analyzes how to distribute resources, especially and to address speeding. I'm sure you hear about speeding in neighborhoods, and you send officers out to address speeding, especially near schools. So you collect that data. Would be really helpful to sort of figure out how to set those priorities. Right now, we just say, well, if you collect signatures, we'll consider it. And a lot of those neighborhoods, you know, there's mixed uses, there's rentals, there's all kinds of reasons why they're not collecting signatures. And yet you may realize that's where we're sending a lot of officers to catch speeders. That's where a lot of demand is. And we tell them, you know, you post a speed limit sign, that people aren't even looking up from whatever their unit is to even see what the speed limit sign. We tell them, you know, it doesn't affect it. So the more we can interact there and then set those priorities and adjust policies would be really, really helpful. Learning about how those external elements, those vertical elements, the design of the road sends signals to force people away from focusing on whatever it is that's keeping them focused in their car, on their cell phones, or on some interactive device. Because people are smart in these neighborhoods, and what they do is they avoid that street. I mean, it's their neighborhood street. They normally would let their kids cycle or walk to school, but nope, I'm going to avoid it because it's dangerous. So you're not going to have crash data because people wisely have avoided that. But as a result, we end up actually encouraging people to use vehicles when they don't have to in their own neighborhood, and to feel unsafe when they get to certain collector roads. So the more we can work hand in glove with the city to set the priorities on where the most serious speeding is happening through neighborhoods would be the better. And I think one of the things we're going to be talking about later today is actually figuring out, as we scope projects, this is where we want. So you actually get to participate in providing that data and helping us scope out those projects and prioritizing those where you're seeing the most speeding. So I look forward to this.
Thank you, Commissioner. Well, first, thank you for thinking I look young enough that I don't remember stick shifts. I appreciate that quite a bit. Secondly, I think that I sincerely appreciate you recognizing that roadway design and, you know, what has historically been called forgiving roadway design actually can be, you know, something that exacerbates road usage conditions. I know in talking to other departments within the city, they're willing to collaborate if they're pointing out ideas that, you know, we want to do what we can as a whole city working in partnership with ACHD to look at ways that we can help make the roadways safer. So I will definitely have my staff look at what we know are high distracted driving, high speed areas, convey that information, but I would also like to serve as a conduit to any other department in the city that may be of benefit to helping us with some of the engineering design issues.
All right.
Yeah, Mr.
Yes.
President, if I may, just briefly, Chief Lee, thank you for being here. I appreciate the presentation. You mentioned an invitation for a member of this commission to attend briefings with the Boise Police Department. I served, before being on the ACHD Commission, I served for 3 years on the Meridian Transportation Commission, and we had, on a regular basis, an officer from the Meridian Police Department would come to our meetings and give us information of that sort. And I wonder if, you know, I don't know which of those approaches would be best. If we sent one of us to your meetings, it's possible that one might not bring everything back, or at least in a first hand. On the other hand, I know there's the issue of you sending someone here, but either way we do that, I think that's a very good idea because we want to get that information. So thank you.
No, I appreciate that, Commissioner, and I think that probably the answer is C, all of the above. I would always extend that option. But I will definitely task the new lieutenant over our traffic unit with being the conduit to connect here. And so I think as your staff figures out what would be the appropriate intervals for a briefing, it can make sure that he gets there. And having, like I said, having been a former traffic officer himself, he's very passionate about this work. He can probably communicate very effectively information that you need.
Mr. President, I have one more question.
Yes.
Chief Lee, I'm sure you talk to the sheriff and your teams talk to one another, but you know, since Ada County Highway District is Ada County-wide, and I'm looking forward to meeting the sheriff as well, could you explain just some of those communications that you guys do have around traffic design? And I think it would just behoove us to know kind of how you two coordinate and and the power, and I just want you to know that there's tremendous power in the two of you really leveraging your observations to the commission.
So it's not really just with just the sheriff's office where we communicate about places where there are sheriff's responsibilities that interface with police responsibilities, but our teams have the ability to talk along with the Idaho State Police, who do a significant amount of traffic enforcement here in the Treasure Valley as well. And so it's really the ability to communicate about general trends that we are seeing that may affect between the different areas of responsibility we have, as well as those interfaces and trends that we're seeing at places where, say, for example, Eagle interfaces with a city or CUNA interfaces with a city. What are we seeing there? Those both being the sheriff's responsibility. What can we do to collaborate our efforts there? And then there are, as appropriate during, dates that we know historically are highly challenged dates for traffic enforcement. There are collaborative efforts amongst those three agencies, as well as the Meridian Police Department, in doing enforcement efforts over a broader scope.
All right, Chief, thank you again. I hope we always see you under positive circumstances.
Well, it was a pleasure to meet all of you.
And
Thank you
best
very
of
much.
success in your career here in Boise.
Thank you very much, sir.
One last thing, was really impressed that you pronounced CUNA properly.
I've been coached.
That's great. All right, folks, it's time for us to begin our commission meeting. Before we have the pledge, there's one thing I would like to ask the commissioners, and that's if they have any comments about the agenda today.
President, I have a question.
Yes.
I would like to know just a little bit more around the urban renewal district of Meridian. I mean, there's two separate things here. Just a little bit more clarity and context would be really helpful for me at least.
That's why we keep Steve around.
Sure. Thank you,
Pause
Mr. President, Commissioners. Steve Price, General Counsel. If you recall, the Meridian Development Corporation came a couple of weeks ago with Senator Lakey and provided a review of what they're proposing in these two urban renewal areas. One of the components of them going forward with that project is getting the tax increment from ACHD to help fund those projects. If you recall, a law was changed a couple of years ago that requires that agreement to be in place. And what's being presented to you today for your adoption is that agreement for both of those districts. The idea of the agreement is to make sure that the tax increment from ACHD is earmarked for transportation components or improvements within that urban renewal district. And that's what that agreement provides.
Thank you, Steve.
Are there any other questions about the agenda? Then with that in mind, we will go ahead and begin our meeting. We'll have the administrative report at the end of our meeting. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Again, we're grateful for all of your attendance, and I would ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
For a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Now, concerning the consent agenda, items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a commissioner or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. All consent agenda items are commission action items unless otherwise noted. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Consent agenda?
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. We'll go over to the regular agenda, the first item of which is resolution number 2370, which is a proposed vacation exchange and acceptance of an application to vacate public right-of-way at Rising Sun Subdivision Number 1 on CUNA Road. And we'll hear from Dave Serdar, who's our right-of-way supervisor and the only one I know personally responsible for having pheasants put on the endangered species list.
I don't think, President Goldthorpe, commissioners, I don't think they're endangered for me. I'm rather forgiving for them. All right, thank you, President Goldthorpe, commissioners. For the record, David Serdar, right-of-way supervisor, Ada County Highway District. This is a public hearing and decision briefing for a right-of-way vacation and exchange in CUNA.
We're not seeing it on our screen, I don't think.
It's not zooming.
Commissioners, can you see that now? Okay, thank you. All right, I'll just start over. For the record, David Serdar, right-of-way supervisor for Ada County Highway District. This is a public hearing and decision briefing for a right-of-way vacation exchange in CUNA. ACHD received a vacation exchange application for the Rising Sun LLC from JUB Engineers. The vacation area in this is approximately 0.48 acres. The exchange area is 3.34 acres. The value of the vacation is approximately $25,000, and the value of the dedication is approximately $172,000. The administrative fee has been paid. This is a vicinity map of the vacation. As you can see, up in the top left-hand corner is Meridian Road on the elbow. You can see CUNA Road coming across. It borders this property on the north. As you can see, the yellow is one of the access points. And then over to the east is Strobo Road. Take a little closer look here. Once again, the yellow is already dedicated roadway. It is going to remain one of the access points to the site. The green is the area of dedication. The red is the area of vacation. What they're pretty much doing here is relocating the road to best utilize the property that they're developing for the subdivision. This is an actual approved preliminary plat that was approved by ACHD in July of 2017. As you can see the access point, which we've seen as the yellow, but there's also additional roads in plat, as well as an access point that comes out onto Strobel Road, and then there's an access, a future stub out for any development that happens west, kind of down in that little arm in that area. I don't know, thumb, I guess, be the way to say that. As said before, there's no fees charged for this vacation, as the dedication value exceeds the value of the vacation. So funds due to ACHD before recording will be zero. It is staff recommendation that the commission adopt and sign resolution 2370, authorizing the proposed vacation of public right-of-way. Applicants have completed all commission and staff requirements. I'll remain standing if there's any questions. And the applicant is available if there's any questions as well.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for Mr. Sirdar?
Mr. President, I do have a question, but it might be one that's better for the applicant. If we could go back to the plat map. Looking at the southwest portion, there's some parcels out there, but that public right-of-way doesn't connect. Is that a, what does it say, is there an existing private drive? Anyway, it looks like you've got some landlocked parcels with no access points to them. And I'm just curious about that on the extreme southwest corner.
Good afternoon, Wendy Sharif with JEB Engineers. My business address is 2760 Excursion Way in Meridian. And sorry I didn't dress up. I didn't realize it was Commission Day. I also have scouts after.
We do have a dress code for, no.
You're just fine.
You can see us on Fridays.
Okay, so which are you looking at the parcels that are still in the county that are over on the western side?
Yeah, on the extreme southwest corner.
So those are under common ownership. I've actually met with those neighbors. Can we see where Strobel is in relation to this?
Well, Strobel's over there on the right, on the east. I'm looking at the opposite.
Let's see.
The opposite.
So those are, they have existing homes, and I think we can't see some of the access points that are on the eastern, they're on the western side. Oh, this is not their access for those parcels. Do you have an area where we could show where those?
So those parcels have other access to public roads?
Correct.
Is that what you're saying?
This is not their access point.
Okay. All right. That was my only.
It would make it a little bit clearer.
All right.
Okay. And those parcels, I believe, are under common ownership. And I did a neighborhood meeting at that with those neighbors.
Okay. Well, and I assume that the city reviewed this, and of course, they're the ones that make the issues about emergency access and so on, and that's the reason for my question. So as long as that looks good, then I don't have a problem.
And as a newbie, like what does common ownership mean exactly?
It's when you have adjacent parcels under the same ownership.
Okay.
So sometimes you would have, a single access point and a single home site and several parcels under the same ownership.
Okay.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. So it's curious, we see that 2017, is it an actual plat or is it a draft or that shows,
Story behind this one.
access? I just want a quick question is about, do you own and have any power to make sure that connection goes through? Because this obviously doesn't. We would have to have a separate dedication in order actually to make this connected to Strobel. And so to me, I'm seeing a trade-off of what would be connectivity north-south with no connectivity even to Strobel, even though, do you not own that land?
Commissioner Hanson, commissioners, so this existing right-of-way that we are vacating, there had been a plat, I believe it was 1918, that was previously platted before the existence of ACHD, and that is the right-of-way we were vacating. That roadway was never constructed and has never been used. So that's the area that we're vacating. My client M3 is actually, we are in the middle of submitting, a new preliminary plat called Rising Sun West, which is actually located in parcels in question. So we have a new preliminary plat we're submitting to City of Kuna this week, for those parcels.
So I guess my concern, and I'll direct this to Dave too, we don't have an assurance that there will be connectivity. By approving this, changes could be made, and that, because it's not, one is not contingent on the other, right?
Let's see, so I just wanna make sure I understand your concern. So your concern is with this vacation, that this is the connection point for those parcels to the west?
So,
This
Right.
vacation, that plat was never constructed, and that roadway has never been used.
right, but the public owns a right-of-way that is halfway or partway between Strobel and Swan Falls Road.
So
It
the
owns a
connection-
right-of-way, that's that yellow and red, and I assume the right-of-way continues on south over the creek. But what we are presented quite a lot is that let's get rid of this connectivity because we can produce a lot of more value with this design. And then we don't get connectivity in advance. As a result, we have super low traffic volumes on all the local roads in between and high ones on the arterials on the end. We've fought tooth and nail to try and preserve mid-mile collectors in between. And a lot, because developments don't happen all at the same time, we often get faced with the prospect of then not fulfilling these connections that aren't connected to some earlier grant or earlier elimination of a public right-of-way. So it's a trade-off, you know. There are consequences for losing connectivity.
Commissioners, Rising Sun 1 we are currently routing the plat. These roads have been constructed, so we have an alternative configuration for the connectivity. Rising Sun 2, you all have also approved construction drawings. That is currently under construction, and we are routing that plat. So when those plats record, this new right-of-way will be dedicated to ACHD. So the connectivity will be preserved.
Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, you're concerned about the east-west connectivity? If we're
I'm
understanding,
concerned about
you're concerned
any
about losing the
'cause we're
connectivity
losing
over the
north-
creek?
We're losing the north-south connectivity. It's gonna be completely gone because Strobel and Swan Falls will be the only north-south roads. There's a little bit of advantage, at least addressing that by connecting it to one of these on the east-west. But even this doesn't guarantee us that we're gonna be connected either to Swan Falls or to Strobel.
Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, there is an access onto Strobel can you go back to the plat, please?
On the plat, is that already been dedicated?
So if you can use the pointer. Okay. So there is a main entrance there on Strobel, about midway through that site. And then the stub street, for that east-west street
Right.
will be stubbed to the west property line.
Yeah, I guess my question is that that's already been dedicated then. So
When this plat records, that right-of-way will be formally dedicated.
Yes.
But
So,
these roadways have been constructed, and we are in the process of routing this plat.
oh, okay.
that's
I
correct.
just
So
wanted
we have
make
to have
sure
all of
that-
the roads constructed before we can finalize the plat.
Yeah, I've seen many plats that then change after 4 years as someone gets a different idea, and if they haven't made the dedication formally.
Well, in this
anything
case,
can
they've
change.
been constructed and they're just going through the punch list.
Great, thank you. That's what I needed to know.
I just have a quick question that, we're talking about connectivity east and west there. What are the plans for any access to Indian Creek, or are there any?
Chairman, Commissioners, we actually, as a part of the Rising Sun plat, we're working with the city of Kuna. There's a city park that's being constructed, and that includes an access, to Indian Creek.
Awesome, because I know how much traffic and parking they've had there on the
It's a parking
southeast.
lot. It's a
Yeah.
parking lot.
Okay. all the people that float the canal, float the creek.
It's fast, that water's fast.
It is.
But yes, that's a part of our plan, and we're working on that.
Yeah.
So there's a pedestrian pathway, and a nice green belt that runs along there, have kind of an amphitheater and a park out there.
Nice.
With a put-in for, floaters.
Okay, any more questions of the applicant?
No?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Any more questions for our staff? Then we will, are there any, is there anyone here or on Zoom that would like to give testimony about this particular item? Okay, in that case, we will close this, and the matter is before the commission for a motion and discussion.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I would move that we adopt resolution number 2370, proposed vacation exchange acceptance of an application to vacate public right-of-way, Rising Sun Sub 1 Cuna Road.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. We'll move on to item number 2, which is a condemnation of public right-of-way for 10 Mile and Victory Road to Oberlin Road, number 519041, P-10 Blood LLC, and we will hear again from our right-of-way supervisor, Dave Serdar. And this is a public hearing.
Thank you. Thank you, President Goldthorpe, Commissioners. Once again, David Serdar, right-of-way supervisor for Ada County Highway District. This is a public hearing and decision briefing for a condemnation on the 10-mile Victory Road to Oberlin project. This is parcel 10, which is Blood LLC. This project was approved in the integrated 5-year work plan that was adopted September 23rd, 2020. Funding for the right-of-way as well as construction is provided in the fiscal year 22 budget, which was approved on August 25th, 2021. The current appraised value of the acquisition is $213,000. The property size before the acquisition is 5 acres. The acquisition area is just under 10,000 square feet. The easement area is just under 2,000 square feet. This is currently in an area which is zoning is RUT, which stands for Rural Urban Transition. It's an area that's has a lot of farms but also is in the transition. This is a vicinity map. As you can see, Lamont Street, hopefully this is right up here on the north, right there. 10 Mile comes down right here, and then Val Vista comes in tees, kind of opposite, on the opposite side of the road. We'll pull this up, it's a little closer picture here. This is a close-up of the acquisition. As you can see, there's a house here. The actual pathway, which will be in this area, is going to be about 11 feet from the house, which is part of the reason you're seeing a larger appraised value on this. And as you can see, the red is the actual acquisition of far as fee. The green is what is a permanent easement, and the yellow is temporary construction easement, which has to do with rebuilding the driveway. ACHD mailed the offer package in August of 2021. Landowner immediately had counsel represent them. The landowner's attorney has reported back to ACHD staff that they've had a difficult time finding appraisers due to a limited number in the market right now. Appraisers are not immune to the staffing issues that have been going on. ACHD staff suggested doing a right of entry so we could keep the project on schedule, as well as give them time to go ahead and get the appraisals that were needed and so forth, that they wanted to present to ACHD staff. Back in September, ACHD, on the 23rd of September, ACHD mailed a final, what we call 10-day offer letter. That was, we also mailed and emailed a right of entry, so for them to sign if they were so inclined to do so. Right away for a couple of weeks, left a couple of messages trying to get an answer from the attorney. We eventually did, and have had several conversations with the attorney since. The attorney informed right away that the property owner was not willing to sign a right of entry, and we listened to concerns. Eventually, ACHD staff did present a counteroffer. We are waiting to find an answer to that. This project is a critical project, and this parcel is a critical parcel for this project for the 2022 construction. It is staff recommendation that we declare the acquisition area for the project as a right-of-way and public use, authorize the staff to proceed with the condemnation action, and execute an order of condemnation for the acquisition area. I'll remain standing for any questions.
Yes, so Dave, I'm intimately familiar with this parcel because I live so close to it. And the previous commission had a matter appear before us. If you go back to that Google Earth picture, yeah, at one time there was a construction equipment yard being operated here illegally, and that was probably with the prior owners, correct?
I do know that our appraiser identified that there is still some business coming up off of the west, Commissioner, President Goldthorpe, so.
Well, I see absolutely.
Yeah, this area right here, but
yeah, there's
not
nothing
in our acquisition area.
Yeah, well, I knew that. But my concern is that, you know, how little room there is left from the proposed right-of-way purchase or condemnation to the home. Mm-hmm. And what, if any, thought or conversation was there about offering to purchase that entire piece of property up there, maybe to the swimming pool or something? Had we considered that?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioners, yes, staff has considered that. Certainly we would be open to that discussion. So far, the property owner has, you know, they do want to keep that property. You know, it's possible, it's a big piece of property here, it's 5 acres, they can potentially move the house on site. At the current time, our appraiser does go and they value that property. In the part of that property, because our acquisition is within, you know, about 10 feet, there's a thing called a proximity damage.
Right.
We have noted that in the appraisers, and it's something we've also taken a look in as far as our negotiations, not to get into specific numbers, but we are very well aware of the potential to purchase that property or have a discussion about the damage, and we are very well aware of the distance.
Okay. Yeah, I knew you were. Do you know if when the folks that are the owners here purchased this property, if they were informed of our project in the future?
President Goldthorpe, I don't have the answer to that question. Okay. What type of, you know, we go through the standard notifications as to whether this particular owner has it. I don't have that answer.
Oh, I didn't think we had any responsibility to do that because we don't know who's looking at houses. But I do know that other people do. And I'm just, if we go ahead with this condemnation, will we still be discussing the purchase of a greater amount of that property with it? Thank you. I just got a thumbs up from Steve. I am just torn. like I said, I drive by here multiple times a day, and if there is a Santa Claus, he would grant me one wish, and that is when this project is over, we'd have a ride-in, ride-out only on Lamont, because there are so many crashes here. And we actually did a request for crashes here, 2 or 3 years ago now. And I made a request of the sheriff's department to do a hand count of all the crashes here, and found out that reported crashes were like 1 out of 5 of what the sheriff's department came up for me. And so when we talk about crash reports, I kind of shake my head and roll my eyes and all that good stuff. We just talked about it with the Boise police chief as well. And so I must say it's very, very difficult for me to make a decision on this, knowing what I do about the safety issues here. And if you look at there's a tree just a few feet to the south of this intersection of Lamont. That tree has a lot of its bark gone because it's had so many vehicles that decide all of a sudden they're not going to turn right on Lamont, try to get into the left lane, the only remaining lane, and try to cut in front of all manner of traffic and then crash into this huge tree. And I'm sure that tree will be gone. That's the best thing I can see about this condemnation, to tell you the truth. But I can't help, because I'm so familiar with this property, to put myself in the shoes of these folks here and really want for them what is going to work for them.
Mr. President, I just had a quick question. Are the property owners the original property owners?
No.
They're not? And then when did we first start the engagement with them on the timeline? I can't recall the date that was on the slide. Could you refresh my memory?
Mr. President, Commissioners, I'll go back to that slide. So it was August 6th is the answer to that specific question.
Oh, so that was the first point of engagement?
Offer package was mailed out, yes. As you say, we've been in active negotiations and continue to be in active negotiations on the property. And as with most condemnations, as we go through this process, the condemnation step is one step in the process. It doesn't finalize conversations. It doesn't end negotiations. Oftentimes it does the opposite. It enhances and helps us with our negotiation process. So that's why we're before you today. Seeking this condemnation is due to the timeline of the project. This is in your approved fiscal year 22 budget. South 10 Mile Road, as you're very aware, is a mobility corridor, has been identified as a priority corridor for the city of Meridian, the city of Kuna. It will have pathways and other safety enhancements that certainly do not exist there today. And speaking specifically to the intersection at Lamont, that intersection will be reconfigured. It will have lighting and other things that it does not have today, certainly.
What kind of lighting? Because there's this whole signalized intersection just a block to the north.
I'm talking about highway lighting.
Okay.
Mr. President, highway lighting. So yes, you have Val Vista and Lamont and other things, but with our intersection designs, there'll be a center turn lane, there'll be a refuge area for vehicles entering the roadway. And so there's going to be a lot of design features. This intersection will look nothing like it looks today. That's certainly the case. So all of that is obviously been previously approved, and we're here today seeking this condemnation to keep the project on schedule.
Okay. I've got a question for Steve. Because I promised myself, my wife, and a lot of other people I wouldn't do stupid things how much can we, I made a comment about what these folks might have known or might not have known about the potential for their property when they bought it. Can we help them, or is through the process of figuring that out? If it were me and I hadn't been told that this project was coming in, and here we go, and we're looking to obtain a lot of their property right next to their front door, I'd be looking for all the help I could get, and deep pockets all over town.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Commissioner Steve Price, General Counsel for the record. One is most certainly with our integrated 5-year work program and our budget, we can find out whether the realtors in that disclosed that to them, and we're most certainly happy to do that.
My house is for sale right now, and I had to do checklist after checklist after checklist of what I knew was going to happen on Black Cat.
Yeah, but about to that extent, that's about the most that we can do. This project's been on the books for a long, long time. The other point is that I've reviewed this matter as well as our right-of-way team, and we've reviewed this several times. Most certainly recognize some of the impacts that you have as well, and shared your concerns. And I can assure you that as the negotiations go forward, I most certainly have those in mind, and we'll come back to the commission and report any proposed resolution.
Well, I've only been actively engaged in, I think, maybe one, maybe two condemnations before, in the whole time I've been on the commission. And I know that we've wind up doing the right thing. So all I'm expressing are my concerns.
These proximity cases are, they're gut-wrenching, and we most certainly take that into account, but we need to continue the dialogue with the property owner. They have options. They can take the damage and leave the house, or we can acquire it, and that's most certainly something that we intend to explore with them.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Let me just make a comment, and I think, number one, it's good and that the standard procedure is, even when there is a condemnation, because we've got to move forward with the process, or the project, that of course there's ongoing discussions, because often the condemnation is not the end of the road, and that's very good, and I'm glad to see that. And of course, my primary comment is this: we have, and I've said this many times, we still have hundreds of miles of these 2-lane farm-to-market roads, and in many of them, we're going to have this situation crop up a lot, because there are lots of places where you drive on these 2-lane roads and you see somebody built a house in, 1942, and it's only, 60 feet from the edge of pavement now, and they're either going to lose their entire front yard or what have you. And it's unfortunate that back in the day when some of this property was developed, that there wasn't more foresight to realize that eventually these roads will be widened out. But then again, a lot of times when these houses were built, these people were 10 miles from any sort of urban development of any kind. And so they thought, that's going to be generations in the future. And of course, here we are. It only takes, because the county has developed so fast. So we're going to see this sort of thing again. And we have to be, understanding of the give and take and the pros and cons of all these kinds of situations, because we'll see them again.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Just have a question,
Yes.
a little bit about the design. I'm assuming impact fees will pay for whatever we have to pay to this landowner to either acquire what we're asking here or acquire the whole lot and move and demolish that.
Mr. President, members of the commission, yes, right-of-way acquisition is impact fee eligible.
100%.
Yes.
Yeah. It looks like, just from the configuration, I have the same concerns that Commissioner Goldthorpe has. And it looks like the way in which Lamont is located, so close to Oberlin, is that it's basically the continuation of Oberlin to the west for those people who don't want to go onto the freeway. And that is that the way it's perceived? Obviously, we're close to the county line, and it'll go south of where 16 is going to hit the interstate. I'm just trying to figure out, there's no reference in the staff report as to what Lamont's size is going to be. It's not listed as in our CIP as a 5-lane arterial, or so I'm trying to figure out whether, what's going to look like. And you indicated there's a signalized intersection here, not a roundabout, or just a right in, right out, or?
Mr. President.
Several questions, sorry.
Commissioner Hanson, all very good questions. So as part of our master street map, the configuration of roadways in this area is anticipated to be different than it is today, obviously through the development process that will pressure this area. And the connection of Highway 16 at or near McDermott Road and other things happening. And this is also very near the border of Ada County, where you have Canyon County operating in this vicinity also. So I think the short answer is what this looks like today. And if you pull up a map of this area and look at it, it is primarily either very large lot. The lots along Lamont, I think, are 5-acre lots, and there's other large lots out. The city's vision for this area is redevelopment and growth. And so there's no doubt about that. And so the roadway configuration over time, as this area is reconfigured and redeveloped, will be modified per our master street map and our policies associated with new development and connectivity in this area. So that's the broad answer to your question. And that's why Lamont isn't specifically called out. And I don't have it off the top of my head, but Christy can probably help me understand or help remind us of what the exact configuration is.
I have some friends that have been in to talk to Christy a few times.
Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of those things happening right now. Thank you, Christy.
Mr. President, Commissioner Hansen, on the master street map, Lamont is designated as a collector. We've had a couple of applications on this segment, I believe. So it's a residential collector, bike lanes, sidewalks. So as development comes in, they're constructing their half of the roadway. But then I also wanted to address, I think I heard you ask about Lamont being kind of Overland extended, and that's not the case. We do, Overland Road will be extended west to Airport Road in Canyon County, and we have already started right-of-way preservation as development occurs in those areas. So Lamont is a collector, and Overland will remain the arterial.
So our goal is to design it in a way to keep people from using Lamont as a continuation of Overland. We'll actually have a separate connection that we will build. Our intent versus the way in which people actually live and drive to whatever businesses are put there's one thing. So my question then, I guess, to all of you is, are we taking if our intent is to keep Lamont as a collector, are we taking an awful lot on that corner, which looks almost like you can put a big old slip lane, right turn lane, which we don't want to build anymore, remember, for people coming from the west and heading south to Kuna on 10 Mile. I assume the design that is going forward on 10 Mile does not have that, but is sort of trying to figure this out.
Yeah, Mr. President, Commissioner Hansen, no, there's no plan for a slip lane or any type of free-running right turn lane off of Lamont onto 10 Mile Road. The primary purpose for a large section of that right-of-way acquisition is due to the multi-use pathway that we're building along 10 Mile Road and the design feature of offsetting that pathway away from 10 Mile, as we recently discussed, putting those pedestrians and cyclists in a safer position when they're crossing Lamont at 10 Mile. That's the primary purpose for that larger section of right-of-way acquisition there at the corner.
Great, and that's great. I'm glad to hear that, and it'd be great to have that written in the staff report, because it looked to me, what I understand, is there a big old roundabout going in here, or what's going to come in here? And I think it's important, since we're already saying in the staff report we're going to widen 10 Mile, we need to be a little more specific about what the reasons for the connections are, and just to as a reminder. But now it's on the record, so I can.
Mr. President?
Do that.
Yes.
It's more an observation. I understand the critical nature of the project and all of that. And I'm just wondering, looking at the dates when we started to engage with them, a project like this with the proximity issue and the timeline, would it have been more beneficial if we had started to engage with them prior to this August? I realize that the negotiations are going to continue and all of that, but it is kind of an abbreviated time frame. So,
Mr. President, Commissioner May, thank you for bringing that up, and I should have clarified this sooner. So during the design process, which lasted for almost 18 months, we had been in coordination and
With
working
them.
with that property owner. We sat in their home, we looked at design options and alternatives. All of that was happening. The August date was the official offer package for the
Okay.
right-of-way.
Thank
So
you, Justin.
I
I was
apologize.
assuming.
No,
I
that
was assuming, but we just had that date there, and I thought, boy, that's a quick turnaround, so thank you for clarifying that for the
And I
record.
apologize, and that is our standard practice on all these
Yeah.
projects. Typically, we're out there working with those property owners through the public involvement process, and a property owner like this, there's a lot of detailed coordination going
Absolutely.
in. It's just that specific offer
Very
package,
good.
so,
Thank you.
so thank you, sorry about that.
Mr. President,
Sure.
I just want to say thank you, Mary, for that, Commissioner May, for that question, because I had a similar observation. No questions for you two, just some comments, and I just wanted to echo, Commissioner Goldthorpe's and Hanson's, concerns and questions, and I have full confidence in our staff to have those conversations with the property owner and, making sure that this is the best result, that could come out of this.
And to Jim's concerns or remarks and questions, if you head west on Lamont to Black Cat, I think Christie has had my friends come in. There have been talks of putting a hotel there, over 100 residential units there, because it's anticipated, and it's happening as we speak, that the right construction, though, the gravel pit, Busy Bee, just to the north of Lamont, there's one row of homes, 5 acres, and then there's a gravel pit. That's filling in. And it's kind of up in the air as to what's going to happen with that, but that's where Oberlin will have the impact there. And it's going to develop in a fairly substantial way right at the Overland and 10 Mile intersection. Right now, there's a property that has been purchased by Jackson's, and there's going to be a service station there, a big sign. And all kinds of things are starting to happen that when I moved out in this neighborhood 33 years ago, only pheasants. And so thanks. If there are no further questions or comments of staff, I would ask if the applicant is here.
So in this instance, there's no applicant, so this is a condemnation. This is
No
being-
applicant, okay.
Being brought forward to you by staff. Thank you.
Yep, okay. Pardon? Okay, thank you very much. Then in that case, we will close the public hearing, and the matter is properly before the commission for a motion and discussion.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I move that we approve the condemnation of public right-of-way for 10 Mile Road, Victory Road, Oberlin, parcel 10, owned by Blood LLC.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you very much. And thank you, staff, for your concern for this property owner. Item number 3 is a request for a waiver of an appeal timeline from the city of Boise of our development policy 7101.6.7 regarding the timeline to file an appeal of a staff level decision rather. Dang. And here's Christie.
Ready?
We are.
All right. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Christy Little, Development Services Manager. Before you today is a request for waiver of the appeal timeline related to a design review application for BOI 210217. On August 31st of this year, ACHD staff approved at the staff level, approved a design review application and issued that. Prior to the final approval, the applicant notified our staff, the city staff had requested some changes to their site plan, which were not in conformance with ACHD policy or what was approved in the ACHD staff report. So our staff met with city staff and talked about how to move forward with this. Our staff had been unaware up until that point that the city had concerns with this particular issue. And I'm trying not to give you too many details because the issue is not why we're here. So no appeal was received from the applicant or any other party within the 10-day timeline as outlined in our policy. So you can see here that it's just the standard 10 working days from the date of the decision. On 11 October, we received an appeal, a waiver request for the appeal from the city of Boise. They are requesting that the commission waive the timeline so that they can formally appeal the ACHD staff decision. You can see here the modifications and waivers. In our policy manual, we spell out in section 7104.1 findings required to support modifications and waivers. So I'll just run through these quickly. Parcel of real property that's unusual in size, shape, or location, modification of waiver of development policies that won't impact other adjacent parcels, public safety, other conditions that might not be applicable to all parcels. So these are the findings that, or a finding that the commission will have to make to grant this waiver request. So the commission has two alternatives today. You can deny the request for waiver and the conditions stand as presented on August 31st, or the commission can grant the city's request for a waiver. And if that is the case, then the city granting the waiver will allow the city to file an appeal, and the design review application will be scheduled as a regular agenda item on a future date to hear the city's appeal. And with that, I will stand for questions.
My only question was if we have a legitimate legal way to grant the waiver. My other question is that should we grant the waiver, do you think this might be construed as an easy out for anyone else that wants a waiver for this?
Mr. President, you put me on the spot today.
Well, I appreciate your counsel. That's why I get to ask you and I trust you.
My opinion is that I cannot make a finding for this waiver based on this policy. My experience is that a lot of applicants or parties involved in development applications, if they come back several months after and we remind them that in the report that you received, it outlines our appeal timelines, then they typically just nod their head and say, yep, we missed them, and they move on. There have maybe been, I've been here 20 years, maybe less than 5 that have actually come to the commission requesting that the appeal timeline be waived.
Well, I believe you because it's pretty black and white. Okay, that was my only question. Are there any questions for Christie?
Yeah, Mr. President, Christie, if we deny the request for waiver, can the city simply reapply? Is it, what's the result?
Mr. President, Commissioner McKinney, no, the result is that the ACHD conditions stand.
Okay.
And it is a condition that's within ACHD's authority, and and the city doesn't have a policy that addresses it. So we're not in conflict with agency policies.
Okay. I'm looking at these findings required. And of course, this is the kind of thing that lawyers deal with all the time. But if you look at these 4 conditions, it says and. So all 4 of them have to be met for us to agree to a waiver. Number 1 looks like a problem. Is there any aspect of the real property involved that is so unusual in size, shape, location, or physical condition that strict enforcement would result in extraordinary economic and design hardships? What kind of size, shape, location, and physical condition unusual conditions exist with respect to the parcel we're dealing with? Are there any that we can point to?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner McKinney, no.
And then conditions upon, and this is the third one, conditions upon the request for modification are unique to the property for which the modification or waiver is sought and not applicable generally to other property, is that one satisfied?
No.
You know, given this situation, it's unfortunate that, you know, that we're here, but I don't see any way that we can grant the waiver, given that the findings required, just, if we simply can't say that those findings are met, I don't see any way we could grant the request.
Any other questions or comments?
Mr. President,
Yes.
thanks, Christie. The city's letter states that it actually is in conflict with the city's Central Edition master plan and associated policies of the city. So, since we're not dealing with the substance of this appeal, we can't really make an opinion as to the substance of the appeal. We may actually deny the appeal, but to make a judgment simply on a timing issue, on the substance of it, I think would be irresponsible on our part. I think we should grant them the time. Why it took them a little longer to figure out they needed to appeal in the time frame, I don't know. They're probably struggling, as I know we are, with staffing shortages. And so, rather than poke them in the eye as a fellow public agency, I think we should grant the appeal, grant the waiver of the time frame. I think it meets the requirements with respect to the time frame, not the substance. We're not talking about the appeal itself. As Christie has pointed out, we are not talking about the substance of the city's appeal, which we may or may not grant in the future when we hear substantive evidence. So unless anyone has any further comment, I would make a motion that we grant a waiver of the timeline appeal and allow the city of Boise to...
Is the city entitled to speak to us at all? Okay, let's give them a chance first. Any other questions or comments for Christie?
I'll hold on to
You
my
might ask that question if the city is here.
I'll hold on to my motion, but
Yeah, is the city here to address us? Is the city on Zoom?
I'm sorry, Sean, I asked you on a mute.
Thank you, President Goldthorpe, members of the commission. This is Sean Keithley, City Boise Office of the Mayor, Director of Economic Development. I appreciate you all giving us a chance to speak to this item today and have this appeal heard by the commission. I'd like to thank as well ACHD staff for the timely action to bring the item to be heard and respect the facts and finding that they presented in their memo. I will make the point that this is an unusual situation with a lot of moving parts and stakeholders, and not to mention a complex project that has the potential to really transform that block of downtown in a meaningful way. And we really want to do our best to get this right from a review standpoint. As Commissioner Hansen mentioned, our position is that this particular request to the commission is for the waiver of the time frame specifically. Again, we're not getting into the substance of the appeal. We look forward to presenting that to the commission should this waiver of the time frame be granted, which we believe is simply just that request, just a waiver of the time frame. We certainly do our utmost to respect policy and the timelines for agency partners. In this case, with the level of review required, communications with stakeholders, including our agency partners, the applicant, and others in the community, staff was just simply not in a position to make the determination within that 10-day time frame that an appeal would need to be filed. So we apologize for that, and we ask for an opportunity to have additional time outside of that provided in the district's policy to file an appeal. So we look forward to working with your staff and this commission on next steps, and look forward to working toward a timely and mutual acceptable resolution in this matter.
So
Thank you.
Sean, Jim asked the question of Christie. I'll ask it of you. Why? What happened?
President Goldthorpe, members of the commission, again, we consider this to be just an unusual situation.
No. What happened to cause you to miss the 10-day requirement?
Exactly that. The level of complexity, Mr. President, with the project review, the level of communication that was happening with a number of stakeholders and staff. Our staff, I know, was working hard to get this review completed, but it's an unprecedented level of review and communication that was going on, and again, we want to make sure that we get this right from a review standpoint, and that time that would be required to make that appeal, given everything else that they were trying to consider, just was not sufficient in this case.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have a question or comment for Sean?
Mr. President, I have a question
Yes.
for Sean. Sean, and forgive me, what's the proposed timeline that you guys are looking for if we were to grant the waiver?
It would be a timeline sufficient to file the appeal. I suppose a 10-day time frame consistent with your policy would be acceptable to us to make that happen.
Thank you, Sean.
Okay. Doesn't look like there's any more questions or comments, so Sean, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. President?
Yes.
If I may make a comment. I have to admit that the concern about the complexity of the case as a basis for not requesting appeal, I have a hard time with that, given that, for example, in the federal courts, regardless of how complex a case is, and many federal court cases are exceedingly complex, you still have a 15-day window to file an appeal after a decision. So the complexity of the case strikes me as a non-issue. If they don't like the result, if you don't like the result in a situation like this, you file an appeal, and then you take time to figure out, get all your ducks in a row for what your arguments are to win the appeal. But the decision whether or not to request an appeal is not a hard decision to make, generally speaking, even in the most complex cases. So I have a hard time really jumping on board with that reason.
You know, being as this is an opinion of someone who has a law degree and understands what this, and Jim, I'd like you to hear what you have to think about that particular.
Yeah, I think also I'm not offering it as a lawyer. This has only to do with the timing. This has nothing to do with the substance. But the consequence of not granting it means that the substance goes forward. We could do profound land use damage to a very complicated urban neighborhood, the Central Addition. There's a lot of moving parts. And if you've been in and around that neighborhood over the last 10 years, you have seen a lot of complexities. We've had proposals come to us and then being withdrawn. So there's a lot of complexity with respect to that. And if the public is forced to accept some sort of configuration, not based on the substance, but simply because one of the players was a few weeks late in seeking an appeal, there's really no justification for that. I think I suppose you could just stand on principle and say deadlines are deadlines, but the other is that sometimes it's a little like cutting your nose off to spite your face. Like I said, we may or we may not grant the appeal, but we have been, by denying this waiver, we would be denying ourselves the opportunity to find out what those competing, complex, moving parts are of that appeal. And so,
which brings on my next question. If we grant this waiver, Steve, are we going to hear this case?
they'll appeal.
Yes, okay. Christie just answered. Thank you, Christie.
Mr. President.
Yes.
And I just want to say, you know, we're in an unprecedented time with so much growth, so much of a workforce shortage. Like I think all of us are trying to do the best with the resources that we have. So it's not, although it's unfortunate and hopefully it's not a pattern, you know, I feel like it's completely reasonable and we're not immune of missing things either. So, I would support, Commissioner Hansen's, motion if we're ready to do that.
Well, you know, we are in unusual times, and this is an extremely unusual request. As Christy mentioned, in 20 years, she's had 5 of them, I think. And I hear all the time, as maybe some of the rest of the commission does too, how long it takes for us, because of really, really valid reasons, to get through some of the development applications and things, scenarios that our staff is overwhelmed with doing right now. And so, to tell you the truth, I would be inclined to grant the waiver only for that reason. Hopefully, that's not something I can get sued about. What's the deal? You know, what we're talking about granting the waiver for is really not listed on these 4. So what's the downside, Steve?
Mr. President, Commissioner Steve Price, General Counsel for the record. You most certainly can make the grant the waiver in terms of timing. There's no question about that, and the unique facts of an interagency and the like, the chances of it coming back thrown in your face on another application, we always face that risk. So you most certainly have the authority to do that, to grant that waiver. I'm not concerned about getting sued over it in the future. I think that timeframes are a little bit different. This policy was not, it was really written more for the substantive provisions within the section 7100 and 7200 in terms of timeframes. But at the same time, when you weaken these deadlines, then you may face the consequences of where we're going to have to be a little bit more lenient going forward, and it'll slow the business down at the district. But at the same time, it's important to treat everybody fairly. I don't think this is not an instance where the time frame was missed by a year. It wasn't missed by 6 months. It was a relatively short period of time. But overall, I'm not concerned about litigation arising as a result of this, and we'll have to face and distinguish any future requests of time frame going forward. We may look at wanting to modify this policy in terms of addressing time frames going forward.
Okay, thank you very much, and I would agree with you.
Mr. President?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes?
I'm sorry, Commissioner McKinney.
No, go ahead.
If we do, we're waiving the waive, we're doing a waiver on the waiver. But if since it's a timeline issue, that they missed that deadline, if we do move forward on it, I would like to see a motion that has some specific time in there so that it doesn't just keep getting kicked down the road and languish. So I think Sean mentioned 10 days, something like that. So if we have a time certain in there, I think would be beneficial. Should we go that direction?
Mr. President, the idea is if you grant the waiver, then the new date, they would only have 10 days according to policy.
Oh, okay. So that's already built in there.
10 days.
Okay. Okay. I just didn't want it to keep.
Sure, I respect that.
Let me ask one more question to Steve. Would we then have to, the request is for a waiver of policy 7101.6.7. But since we're not actually saying that we can make the findings in 7104.1, do we also have to waive enforcing section 7104.1?
Well, yeah, I guess that's technically correct, that you're also waiving the requirements of 7104.1, so
So our motion ought to include a mention of both.
that's fine.
Yeah.
But we'll
Waiving
make
the
it
waiver.
work. You guys want to waive the time frame, we'll make it work.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
I know you could.
Now, you
No.
can say something, Jim.
No, I'd just say, this is an Ada County unique thing. I mean, if we were the city's transportation department, they wouldn't have this issue, but because we're separate governments, we have these separate rules and so forth. So I'd make a motion to grant the City of Boise's request for a waiver of the appeal timeline. And to the extent that we waive 7104.1, in order for them to file their appeal within 10 days, so granted.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, City of Boise, the motion carries. Thank you very much. Now, we have public communications as the last item on our regular agenda. Is there anyone here who would like to speak to us on any matter whatsoever or on Zoom? Stacy? No. Okay, before I adjourn the meeting, we'll hear from Director Wong for the administrative report. Which we missed earlier.
Mr. President, Commissioners, thank you very much. Very short and right to the point. I place in front of all of you the update on where we are on our retention recruiting incentives. I'm very pleased to announce that we are down to one, and that's the intern to hire program. Last night, we received permission from Percy to take the excess FTO timeframes that our team members have saved up and convert that into a 401k that'll commence on January 28th and every January 28th after that going forward. And then lastly, I do want to remind you that next Tuesday at 11:30 is the Joint Eagle Garden City Chamber of Commerce meeting over here at the Red Lion or event. If you are interested in attending, please let Stacy or me know and we'll take care of the reservations. Other than that, Commissioners, I stand for any questions you might have.
Just a quick question. We don't have any joint meetings yet with the other cities. I was just scratching that.
Not at this time.
Okay.
This is a chamber session.
Right, right. But gotta move on those. Thanks.
Okay.
Building off of that, Stacy, when were we meeting with the sheriff again? Did we solidify those times as well?
Oh, the sheriff is next week
At our commission meeting.
commission meeting,
okay.
5:30.
Yeah,
Thank you.
they were both scheduled at our commission
Perfect.
meeting.
Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Director.
Director Wong, I just wanted to thank you for getting Chief Lee in here today. I think that was really beneficial and really appreciated his presentation. And Commissioner McKinney, to your comment about attending the briefings vis-a-vis having somebody come back in here, I think the police departments of the respective cities, they all go in and do a update report to the council when they have their meetings. So perhaps maybe if they can't do that monthly with us, perhaps quarterly, they could come in and do a formal presentation to us. That might be a suggestion, but I think the offer to go to the briefings was just basically for each commissioner to start some relationship building and have some personal awareness of what's happening there, not to necessarily come back and give a report. So anyway, just a little food for thought there. But I thought it was very beneficial, and I look forward to next week. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. President, Commissioner May, thank you. The chief and I have already started discussions about how we're going to integrate his traffic operations with our staff. I expect to have a sit down with him in the very near future.
Super, thanks.
All right. Unless there's any other questions or comments,
I
this
thought Mr.
meeting.
Daigle had you were just scratching.
You're just scratching, yeah.
Just one more, just compliment. Thank you to the staff the microphones will be an adjustment, but it seemed great hearing folks on Zoom and all of that. So thank you for working through those kinks and making sure that we can all hear everybody regardless if they're remote or in person. So thank you for that.
Ditto. This meeting is adjourned. be on? Yeah, okay, good.
Here you go, Kent.
Okay. Then we'll go ahead and turn the time over to door number 1. Where are you? Okay.
Edison.
Edison, it's your turn.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for today. I will start by sharing my screen. Good afternoon, Commission. My name is Edison Bautista, ACHD Senior Transportation Planner. In today's work session, we want to give you an update to the South Meridian Neighborhood Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan, including a summary of the public involvement and the proposed project list. This work session is an information briefing only, so no decisions required from the Commission at this time. We're also planning to come back in front of the Commission for adoption consideration on October 27, 2021. The South Meridian planning area is shown in this slide. The light polygon delineates the planning area, which follows the city limits south of I-84. The neighborhood plans aim to achieve the following objectives: identify and map the biking and walking destination as it pertains to the planning area. Through a robust public outreach process, identify the community needs for connectivity, biking, and walking facilities. Develop a plan that communicates existing conditions and need, as well as convey proposal of projects to both ACHD and the public. Through robust analysis, technical review, and public outreach, define, prioritize, and rank projects that address the needs identified. And finally, we will identify existing gaps in the sidewalk and bicycle network. Throughout this process, we aim to brand the neighborhood plans to ensure recognition throughout the community and ACHD continued commitment to bicycle and pedestrian improvements. In this slide, I wanted to provide an overview of the public outreach effort. In summary, the outreach process consists in 3 main components: a school outreach, an online comment period, and an online open house. As part of the school outreach, we work in close coordination with schools in the area to survey students from 5th to 8th grade regarding bike and walking from and to school. From this effort, 287 students participated in the survey, and 25 of them provided comments in an interactive comment map. Through this effort, students responded to questions like places they like to visit in the neighborhoods, what keeps them from walking and biking, and what would make it easier for them to ride a bike or walk to a key destination. During the month of April, we released an interactive map to collect public input on locations where the community would like to see bike and pedestrian projects. From this effort, we received a total of 88 comments to a specific location, 30 comments in reference to a posted comment, and 4 comments outside the planning area. After collecting and compiling the feedback, a proposed project list was developed and shared with the public once more, with the use of an online story map, which allowed the public to provide further feedback on bicycle pedestrian projects, as well as rank their top 3 projects. In summary, we received a total of 40 participants for bicycle projects. For pedestrian projects, we received 19 participants, and for crossing projects, we received 24 participants. Overall, through this outreach process, we received a total of 535 comments. The public outreach effort was used to identify and prioritize bicycle, pedestrian, and crossing projects, and develop a draft recommendation project list, which was included as part of the commission packet. This draft list consists of 96 projects, where 26 are bicycle projects, 8 sidewalk projects, and 12 crossing projects, and 15 major roadway projects, which include both bicycle and pedestrian improvements. In this slide, I wanted to share some of the high-ranked projects identified through the neighborhood plan process. Starting with Sutter Road from Victory Road and up to Oberlin, which is planned for design in FY '22, right away in '23, and construction in 2024. Other projects highlighted by the public included Montague Way from Amity Road to Santos Stefano Drive with installation of sidewalk in the east side. And an intersection project at Locust Grove and Wrightwood Drive with installation of an enhanced pedestrian and bicycle crossing. Prior to today's work session, ACC staff presented an update in front of the Meridian City Council on September 21st, with the city expressing full support toward the projects identified during the neighborhood plan process. Additionally, staff released a draft plan on October 13th for public comment. As next steps, we currently in the public comment period until October 27th, when we will come back in front of the commission for adoption consideration. With this, I conclude my presentation and stand for any questions.
Mr. President, and Edinson, this is excellent. I love this. And I assume as you're developing, sort of drilling down and justifying why certain things are priorities, you'll integrate into that narrative our level of traffic stress performance measures to help people understand why we need to go to some areas and other areas might have to wait, so that's a really valuable tool to say this is an area we can significantly impact level of traffic stress for biking and walking. Is that the intent?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Hansen. Yes, so these are as next steps during the scoping and design phases of each of the projects. There will be an analysis for the level of traffic stress that has been adopted by ACH.
Great, thank you.
I tell you that these are some of the more enjoyable presentations for me because I don't enjoy anything any more than I do seeing projects come forward that wind up making connectivity easier and safety much better for our, especially more vulnerable citizens.
Yep. And in your neighborhoods too, where you've walked and biked in that Leica running suit for all these years.
Yeah, Edison, I was just really impressed with the amount of folks that participated. Just really encouraged to see those types of numbers on this type of thing. So thank you so much for making that happen.
Yeah, 535, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Good job, Edison.
A lot of people.
Just to remind the commission, when Parks and Rec, the city of Meridian did their focus groups year before the year I came onto this commission, it was absolutely head and shoulders above any other priority of the citizens of Meridian at that time have pathways and connectivity addressed.
Just a quick question, Edison. The draft plan has been publicly released. Do you have a slide here that shows it, the plan itself, or is that just available online?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner McKinney, it's currently available online through our in ACHC website, through the project website. I don't have a slide for it, but it's currently available. In your commission packet, I included it, and as well as it's available for the public.
Right, okay, thank you.
Good description of each of the projects.
Right.
Yeah.
Edison, thank you very much. We'll go on to the next one now, which is item number 2, or work session number 2, the 5-year work plan, project prioritization methodologies by no other than Tom Laws.
All right. Thank you, President Goldthorpe, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Tom Laws, planning supervisor here with the Ada County Highway District. And today, I really want to just kick off the discussion for our prioritization methodology review. And as a reminder, this discussion was part of the commission directive that came out of the budget adoption hearing a few months back. And we we wanted to hold off to bring this presentation to you until we were complete with those work session items on the current integrated 5-year work plan. For today, my goal is just to review the current methodology that we have for prioritizing projects, to highlight a few potential approaches, and then confirm direction. But to begin with, what do I mean when I'm talking about prioritization? And really what prioritization is the method by which we rank projects in order of importance based on defined criteria. I'll get into a little bit in the following slides what that criteria means, but really what I wanted to do here is just highlight that prioritization is just one piece of the puzzle that creates the integrated 5-year work plan. And the other one, which you've learned over the last few months with all the presentations you've seen from Christy, is the programming side of things. So once we prioritize those projects, we then look at what is the funding that we have with each different category and which each different fiscal year, and help determine where those projects best fit within the integrated 5-year work plan. We really have 3 different methodologies, or 3 different buckets where we use these methodologies currently. The first being the CIP projects, your major road and intersection projects. And this includes a cost-benefit analysis, really looking at congestion relief and crash reduction. We also have a variety of adjustment factors that we take into consideration as well, and these include those partner agency priorities and the prioritized list that we receive each year, our neighborhood plans, just like Edinson just referenced, and the projects that are coming out of those documents, our bike master plan, asset management, and then priority corridors. We also have the community program side of things, and this really focuses on a primary criteria, including proximity to different locations. So proximity to schools, proximity to civic destinations. We have some equity criteria, and then focusing on that network build out and filling gaps as well. Once again, there are some adjustment factors here as well. And then third, we have the asset management side. This is our maintenance side. And really this, we rely on our subject matter experts, and it's based on the greatest need by each category. And so we look at different considerations such as our pavement condition index, our bridge ratings, and ADA inventory. For the purpose of this discussion and the methodology discussion moving forward, I really want to focus on, and the staff recommendation is to focus on those first 2 areas, the CIP projects and the community program projects, leaving that maintenance side alone, and as we are currently using with the methodology. So when I talk about methodology, what do I mean? We are doing currently a program-based approach, and this is really what you see nationwide. It's most common, and there's really 2 different schools of thought. So the program-based, which we're using, you see most often, but then also that project-based, and that's really what we've been tasked to dive into a little bit further. With the program base, we set goals for funding based on programs. So you have your roads and intersection program, you have your community programs. And then we, as a result of that, we're comparing apples to apples within each one of those programs. And so with that, we have individual prioritization methods and individual prioritization lists, what I just went over with you. And I just wanted to highlight here as well that, and oftentimes, a lot of these projects can have benefits to multiple programs. And so the best example of this is with our CIP major expansion projects, where now, thanks to your direction and guidance, we're looking at adding those detached facilities with pathways, with raised bike lanes and sidewalks, and oftentimes those projects can include bridge improvements as well. They can include bicycle pedestrian crossings and different components like that. So you're getting these multiple benefits. On the other side is the project-based approach, and this is really setting up priorities for funding based on specific goals. And so just for example, one goal may be we want to focus on projects with, let's say projects where there's the most use. And so we're looking at roads over a certain ADT level, and we're going to base all of our projects on that. And prioritization on that. And so what that leads to is a single prioritization method and list. So now, not only are we looking at apples to apples, but we're looking at apples and oranges, comparing apples and pears and so forth. And, this one, the program benefits can vary based on the project selected. So for example, if we do determine that our goal is focusing on roadways that have the highest level of ATT, they're gonna be the biggest impact. Well, that might mean that, some of our smaller projects that are more safe routes to school oriented or more on local street gap connections might be the ones that fall down a little bit. That's just one example. There's a lot of different ways we can prioritize that. And then I did want to highlight that we aren't stuck with one of these buckets. We can also determine that we do some sort of hybrid approach where we look at both that program-based and the project-based sides. So with our plan of action, there's really 4 different phases that we are proposing. And with each one of these individual phases, we plan to come back to the commission each time to confirm direction, to make sure we're on the right page, and really make sure that the outcomes that we're seeing are indeed what you were looking for. And one of those being staying with what we currently have today and finding out that yes, indeed, what the methodology we're working with is working and continuing as is. So with that, we have a startup phase where we're proposing to hire a consultant to not only look at our prioritization methodology, but then to go out and identify throughout the nation different jurisdictions that are using that project-based approach. With that, we will determine with both a full coordination with the core advisory committee. We'll be working with the core advisory committee and then our advisory groups as well. And so with that startup phase, we'll really rely on them to determine if there is indeed a better approach out there, which one we should be moving, and move into this development phase. We'll help create a methodology that really fits the uniqueness of the highway district. From there, we'll test it. We'll do a review phase, and with that methodology, see how do these projects shake out with this new approach, and then after that, if the commission agrees that this is the right approach, then we'll work towards implementation and start prioritizing all the projects within the integrated 5-year work plan to fit into that. I mentioned the coordination with our advisory committees, and so what we're proposing here are really 2 different committees. The core committee made up of subject matter experts from all across ACHD and our different departments, but then also our project advisory committee, which is really all of our partner agencies that are actively working with the prioritization currently. But in addition, bringing in our advisory groups as well, and so we're making sure that we have impact from both and feedback from both. So just in conclusion, prioritization is just one component of the integrated 5-year work plan. Currently, we're using a program-based approach, but based on your direction, we'll be exploring both a project-based and a hybrid approach, and we plan for regular commission check-ins all throughout the process. I know that was a lot of information, so with that, I'll stand for any questions. Thank you.
Mr. President. Thank you so much for this presentation. I'm really impressed. I'm really curious. So I'm really excited that you guys are thinking about a consultant. Just looking into what could possibly be a hybrid or pros and cons, and just being able to really say, in this instance, it's really good to do this. In this instance, maybe how we're doing it works really well. So I just think this is really commendable of you and the team, and I think it just will help us make better decisions, and we can also streamline community feedback too. I think that would just be fantastic. So overall, great job.
Thank you.
I would just echo that. I think we've learned a lot from other governments and in the nonprofit sector. Profit sector examples, a lot of times, that because a funder will fund certain things, leaves it sort of like, oh, well, we better run after that. And unless that organization has a set of priorities based on goals and values, then they can make a decision strategically. Okay, what are we going to adjust in order to go after that money? But absent that, and I think it's a good analysis, very good analysis, we tend to just go, well, whatever the sources of money. We don't have that power to set where our money comes from. There's federal and state laws that determine that. So we set the priorities, and then we're smart enough to know, okay, we can move something up and move something down because we have to spend this money in this certain time. I think we've learned a lot through this sudden infusion of money. We not so much as local governments, state governments during COVID with the Recovery Act funds. They've had to determine, okay, here's our priorities. Those that are using it well are saying, this is what we agreed on, this is our priorities. So I really like the direction we're going here, and keep at it. There's a lot of experts out there that, as you found on the advisory groups, can really advise us and set those priorities.
I want to just build off of what Commissioner Hansen just said, and granted, this is just my perspective on just what you said about the funding streams and that dictating the work. And in the work that I do for my day job in public health, we've seen that when you work with the community and you say, oh, we've got these high rates of diabetes, high rates of obesity, high rates of substance use, you go into the community and say, oh, we want to do X, Y, and Z because we have this pot of funding to fix this thing. And they're like, well, that's not the core issue. It really is poverty or lack of supports within the school system or behavioral health. So I think it just really, again, behooves us to think a little bit more strategically around what are we doing to actually support the root cause of these challenges. And we're seeing, as a result of this feedback, because communities are like, we don't want you here because that doesn't work for us. And that, we don't want a diabetes prevention program. We want after-school programming, for example. So as a result of that, we're seeing shifts at the federal level and the state level, trying to get a little bit more innovative in identifying these bigger goals around community health or transportation, whatever, rather than getting into the weeds around how you actually achieve those deliverables.
All right. If there's nothing else, I appreciate you too, Tom.
I do have a comment.
All right.
And this is, and I guess kind of going forward, I'd like to go a little bit beyond this, because part of my concern with regard to prioritization methodologies stems from a presentation we had some months ago where the specific method of applying points and a score to each proposed project to determine its priority. And the one thing that struck me is that when you tallied it all up, when looking at, for example, roadway and intersection projects, the current or projected level of service and the traffic volume as a percentage of the total point score were relatively small, and lots of other concerns about public facilities, pedestrian facilities, so on and so forth. In the end, those factors tended to dominate the decision. That is to say, the point tally included, those were more than 50% of the total points. And it seems to me that when it comes to prioritizing highway projects, our roadway and intersection projects, the level of service and the volume of traffic ought to be the vast majority of the criteria. That is to say, those things dominate, and these other issues then kind of become tiebreakers. That is to say, if we have two situations where we've got high traffic, poor level of service, and let's say you've got two projects that are kind of in the same ballpark, one might be a little above the other, then those other factors could add on and make the one move ahead in priority compared to the other. But if all of those other factors outweigh the traffic condition, we run the risk of prioritizing projects with lower traffic problems go higher on the list. And I think we should be doing the opposite. I believe that the primary criteria for deciding on roadway and intersection projects should be traffic volume, level of service, and I guess we would also take into account, accident history. Those are the three big ones. Everything else is kind of like tiebreaker criteria as far as I'm concerned. Because, that's the way we take our limited resources and apply them to the biggest needs first. And we have some of these other concerns, for example, with regard to sidewalks and pedestrian issues and so on. We look at those separately under the community programs. See, so if there's a roadway project that needs to be done, if it has any of those sidewalk and pedestrian and bicycle problems, they'll get fixed because our standard procedure of doing roadway and intersection projects accounts for those and accommodates those. And so other projects where the roadway is not as significant an issue, those other problems can be dealt with through the community programs, because that's, I think, why it was set up in the first place, to deal with those kinds of situations. And so I'd like to see us look again at the actual point scoring methodology for how we prioritize. And I'd like us to discuss that in more specific detail, because I'm not convinced that I really like the way the proportions are right now.
Okay. Don't have anything to say myself. I'm interested in how this is all evolving, more than a little interested. Unless there's something else that anyone has to offer, we're done and grateful.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, everyone.
That's a wrap.